Is new always better or is it just new? I think that's going to be the theme of today's video. Bienvenidos todos a la habitación de mal ideas. That's right. The cave is back, a little bit different. Welcome to the room of bad ideas. In this video, I'm going to be installing this guy. This is the brand new Shimano CUES front derailleur, or as they pronounce it in Spain, it's Shimano CUES. I'm going to put this on my Sklar, which is set up 2x. I've been using some old 8-speed Shimano front derailleur, and it's worked great. It's not perfect, but more or less I've had no complaints. I wanted to install the CUES one because this is kind of the future of Shimano's low to middle range components, and I wanted to see if it was any good. Full disclosure, this video isn't sponsored. This actually ended up costing me about 47 euros, so you can get this a lot cheaper in the US. So future us here, I thought I would fill in a little bit more context just in case someone stumbles in from the mountain biking world and goes on some angry tirade. What we're doing is we are using the CUES front derailleur on a drop bar bike. As of now, what is it? It's May 12th, 2024. There are no drop bar shifters for the CUES, although they're anticipated. And the way I'm shifting is using a bar end, specifically the Rivendell silver shifter. So if you're looking for CUES information about using it with mountain bike bars and their regular trigger shifter, this is not your video. So just click away. But if you are curious about using CUES now on a drop bar bike, doing hacky things like using friction shifters, then by all means continue watching. For those of you that are keeping score, this is the FD-U6010-L. Basically this guy, it's a CUES front derailleur. It says it'll run 10 and 11 speed. Theoretically, it should work with their 9 speed as well, since they all use the same 11 speed chain. When you buy front derailleurs, there's a couple things to keep in mind. Basically, how it attaches to the bike. This uses a band clamp. Previously, there are derailleurs that use a braze-on, which is what I have on the Sklar. Some use a direct mount, which kind of bolt on directly to the frame of the bike. I went with the band clamp because they didn't have a braze-on option, and it's already a little problematic. I'll get into it a little bit later. Another thing to consider when getting a front derailleur is how you're going to route the cable. So this comes in a couple different flavors. They have a side swing version and the cable is routed through the front. The main advantage of that is if you have a bike that doesn't have a front derailleur stop, you can kind of just zip tie the cable down the down tube and have it connect somewhere here. I think there's a bike shop in Ottawa that did a Bridge Club video series, and they upgraded it with a CUES front derailleur using a side swing front cable loading version of this derailleur. Since I already have the cable stops from my previous derailleur and I didn't want to deal with cutting housing in case that didn't work, I don't have any bulk housing with me, I'm playing it safe, and I got the version that'll do a dual pull. So supposedly you can run the cable from the top and the bottom. With my setup, it's going to be coming from the bottom. So if my current derailleur works fine, why am I doing this? Again, I wanted to see what our future of low to middle range components from Shimano is going to be like, and it looks like CUES is going to be it. One actual practical reason is, interestingly, the CUES front derailleur is shaped to one of my favorite chainring combinations, which is 40-24. I believe that's it. The current front derailleur I'm using is shaped to work best with a old, like 50-34. So you can see on mine, the arc doesn't follow the curve of the big chainring hardly at all. It does work. That's one of the great things about friction shifting. You don't have to have things perfect. You can make a lot of hacky things work. Again, one of the huge advantages of friction shifting. This front derailleur does have some quirks, which to me, are a bit of a head scratcher. So I mentioned that it has a band clamp, which is good. And it also comes with shims, which is, also a good thing to have. But for whatever reason, it doesn't shim down to a 28.6 seat tube, which doesn't make sense to me because I see this going on a lot of like low to mid range bicycles. And if they're steel, they're likely to have a 28.6 seat tube to clamp on. And if you buy this, at least aftermarket, it's got no shims to do that. So thankfully, however, I was able to enlist the help from our Patreon And one of our members there, Dr. Welby, has a STL file to 3D print a shim. And what's cool about this is that it's asymmetrical. So this makes it so it's flexible, it can get around the tube, but you can also adjust the chain line. This was printed in town by our friend Han Rossman, who did some testing and consulting for Bicycle Quarterly in the past. So yeah, kind of full circle on this project. So that's the first issue. Why not have the shim for 28.6, one of the most common diameters for steel bikes? Another thing that's a bit of a head scratcher is they changed the cable pull of a front derailleur. And this absolutely makes no sense to me. Because as far as I know, this front derailleur doesn't have to move any further. You know, it's designed for a double. The old 8-speed one I have there is designed for a double. Why make it so that this requires more cable pull to work? It doesn't make sense. This is something that the folks at Rivendell have already noted. They're actually blowing out their stock of CUES derailleurs. So if you want a relatively inexpensive place to get one, check out the Riv website. What that does is that it requires more lever throw to move this between the two chain rings. Again, the distance between two chain rings has not changed in like the last 25 years. Why they have to fudge with the cable pull is beyond me, other than to just force incompatibility. And again, this is one of those things that drives me absolutely nuts. You know, the bike industry makes changes, they make new things that aren't necessarily better, they're just new. I hate to sound like a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, but you know, at this point, it's nothing about engineering challenges or actual benefit to the end user. It's just to make money and sell you new crap. With that said, I am curious to see how much lever throw it's going to take to move this on the bike. This is what the friction shifter looks like now with the old 8-speed front derailleur. You know, it's a pretty reasonable throw. I'm really curious how awkward and how stiff this is going to feel in comparison. So let's check it out. Before I start taking things apart, you can see what I mean where the derailleur cage never really matches the chainring very well. It's also sitting a bit higher than recommended, but because of friction, this does work. Other interesting issues is just how close the cage is to the chainstay. I'm hoping with the CUES front derailleur that there's a little bit more latitude here, and also that it'll be a little bit further away from the tire. So there are some practical reasons to change to the CUES front derailleur, but it does come with its own issues. So I'm gonna try to do this without having to use a new cable, just because I'm cheap and I want to reuse things. Let's pop that off. Loosening the cable. Pretty simple. You can see this piece here. This is a clamp-on cable stop, and this is what I had to add to this frame. And you can get clamp-on stops like this for most frames, so you can convert them from a 2x. Like I mentioned, if you got the side swing version with the front cable routing, then you just have to zip tie the cable and let it lead out here and go here. But since I have the cable stop, I'm going to use what I got. Hopefully the CUES works and I won't have to reinstall this for my bike ride tomorrow. So let's see where this is going to sit. So about there. I should probably take this guy off. I'm going to take the bottle cage off temporarily. I guess I'll just take the clamp off as well. We'll just commit. We're gonna try to make the Shimano CUES work. So again, you can see the issue here. There's just so much slack, and they didn't include the appropriate shims for this. Let's see if our 3D printed one works. Nice. There's our shim. So already we can see a much nicer improvement. This definitely follows the curve of the big chainring better. Let's get this about where it says it should be. All right. Okay. So I'm pretty happy with the height. Just get it parallel. Again, I think because I'm running at friction, doesn't have to be like super perfect. Seems like there's a little bit more room between the cage and the chainstay. I'd say the clearance between the tire and the cage is probably about the same though. So overall, I think it looks a little bit neater, a little bit tighter in. Not that it made a huge functional difference, but let's see. Okay, so we've got some adjustment screws to set. These are actually nicely labeled. It bugs me when front derailleurs don't have a high-low, or any derailleurs don't have a high-low setting. So this looks like this low setting should probably go in a bit. Interesting, it definitely feels like noticeably harder to actuate the front derailleur, which is kind of annoying. The throw seems to be about the same, but the, yeah, it's just needlessly hard. I think I'm at the stage where I'm gonna reattach the chain and we can see where we're at. All right, so this is going to be the first official shift of the new Shimano CUES front derailleur. Let's see how we get on here. So it went a little far there. Okay, so I think I've got it at a place that where it's shifting okay. It's not the best shifting experience with it on the bike stand. I'm not getting good leverage. I do notice that it does take a lot more force to actually pull the cable, which is rather unfortunate. But yeah, so let's see how this works here. So one thing I didn't even consider is the clearance between the derailleur cage and this crank arm. This is kind of a low Q crank, roadish crank, and pretty tight. It's technically not hitting it, but it's awfully close. Okay, so it's my first shift of the front derailleur on the road, and going down into smaller gear is not a problem. Pretty smooth, very little pressure to drop it down. So the top of the hill, let's put it back into the big ring. Okay, definitely takes a lot more force. All right, shifting into the lower gear. Whoa, big jump. Okay, top of the climb, shifting the front derailleur for the fourth time. Okay. So I got back from my first ride using Shimano CUES or Shimano CUES, depending on how you want to pronounce it. One of the issues I was running into is that it just took a lot more force to actually actuate the shifter. I didn't film it, but the amount of lever throw was actually about the same, but it required maybe at least double, if not triple, the amount of force to pull it into that bigger chainring. And working on it on the stand, it's just difficult to do. When you're riding it, it's actually a lot better of an experience. You know, your body is in the right position, and you just have more leverage rather than just shifting it on a stand. On this ride, I actually counted how many times I shifted the front derailleur, and I only did it 4 times. Twice to go into the smaller chainring, which was not a problem. It was only the 2 times pulling it up into the big chainring. This works for me because I have it set up as a wide range double. So basically 2 very distinct gear ranges. I'm not going back and forth very often. I'm in the big ring for about 95% of the time, covers most rolling terrain, and it's only when things get really steep or I'm carrying a load or I'm tired and I just want to spin up a hill that I have to drop into the smaller ring. So my thinking is this: if you have a similar setup and you don't think you're going to be shifting the front derailleur all that often, then it's passable. But if you have a tighter combination in the front and you do find yourself shifting more often, then it's not great. It's doable, but not great. There are probably better options. I think with my riding style and how the gearing is set up, it's you know, it's okay. I might leave it on for a couple weeks and see how much it bothers me. But it is quite a bit of a surprise at like how concerted an effort you have to get it to shift into the bigger chainring. Again, I think this was a completely needless change by Shimano to change that cable pull ratio in the CUES front derailleur. I can understand with the rear derailleur trying to unify everything to the same cable pull, but the front to me doesn't make sense and is more of a way to kind of build a walled garden. So you're forced to buy, the CUES front derailleur and the CUES front shifter and can't use it with older group sets. So that's probably been the most annoying part of this whole kind of experience. Why change it? The shim issue is also a bit of a head scratcher. It'll be interesting to see how it rolls out, especially as they put out the rumored drop bar version of the system. I imagine a lot of the bikes are going to have 28.6 diameter seat tube. Another thing I noticed is that the derailleur cage seems a little bit wider, especially when I compare it to the 8-speed cage that I took off. And this made it so that the outer part of the cage, if you overshift or you're not careful, could start hitting your crank. The cranks I have on right now are road style cranks, which have a slightly narrower Q factor. So that's another thing to mention. Really wanted this video to end differently, like me loving CUES and saying, hey, it's different, but at least it's good. But here, like at the moment, it just presents some issues to the way I like to set up my weird bikes. But that's just me. I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to be affected by this. But if you're hoping that CUES would play nice with some retro hacks, it's not great. But even for me, I probably won't run this long term. But now you guys know, and if you appreciate me trying this out for you so you don't have to, please join us on Patreon. That's the best way to do it. We don't do sponsored videos on this channel, and we're really community supported, so we can do weird things like this and talk about them in a really honest manner. So yeah, if you like that, join us on Patreon. Or if that's too much of a commitment, pick up some stickers from the merch store. And as always, keep the supple side down.